Hi, Adam. Welcome to the show. It is a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking with you today.
Oh, well, no, the pleasure is mine. And, as we were sort of talking off air, there's I think men's health and women's health really in so many ways are blended together. And there's a lot of things that we collectively focus on. But I know we're going to be sort of diving a bit more heavily into the men's aspect today. We're going to be talking about women as well. But I am so excited because I think we've had some focus on women here and there. And so sort of segueing into the men's aspect of things when it comes to wellness and functional health and all that. I am really excited to be able to bring this to our listeners, and I just can't think of anyone better to talk to. So, again, welcome. It is a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background on yourself? Why don't you highlight some of the reasons why you are now in this space, sort of where you were, now you're here? Why are you so passionate about, this topic and so forth?
Well, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it is because I got to a place really in my early 30s, around 32, 33, where my body just wasn't working the way that it used to. And I didn't know why, and I didn't know what to do about it. But, I come from, a sales background. I was in banking for, 15 years or so before I got into the health and wellness area that I'm doing now. And everything that worked in the past just started not working, and my body didn't feel good. I was lacking energy. I had really bad brain fog. I just couldn't remember anything. My libido took a hit. And I had to talk with my fiance, and I was like, I don't know why I feel this way. I don't know what to do about it. So I started looking into options, like, why do I feel this way? And, I went to a primary care doc in California when we still lived there, and they recommended me getting my blood drawn. So I got some biomarkers checked, and they tested about 10 to 15 biomarkers. It wasn't much. And the thing that, we'll probably get into, the difference between conventional medicine and functional medicine is that, conventional medicine, they're really comparing you to the average American. And, your biomarkers can be really, really low, but still within their quote unquote standard range. And I still felt bad, even though I was in their standard range. So I didn't really get the answers that I was looking for during that initial research that I was doing. So I thankfully found Blokes Men's Health and Joi Women's Wellness, a company that I'm now working for. And we test up to 47 biomarkers, up even to like 80 biomarkers. So we're looking at a fuller picture of patients' health. And as soon as I realized what I was deficient in, I was really low in testosterone. I was really low in vitamin D. Um, my B vitamins were really low. I now knew what to do about it. And I had a clinician and a health coach to kind of walk me through the process of coming up with a treatment plan. And that's what we're really aiming to do at Blokes and Joy. It is not, giving you a pill to mask a symptom. It's really coming from a more holistic approach to optimize your health. And that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. It's interesting because as much as this is talked about on the show, I still feel like average mainstream, I don't know necessarily what the word is, but it still seems as though a lot of people don't really know, or they're not aware of how the conventional paradigm works with medicine in terms of blood work. And I was going to ask you more about this, just in terms of like functionally when a practitioner or a coach is looking at something versus conventional, and how, to your point, I love how you said it, it's really taking the average or the sum of the average American. And what is the average American, right? We live in, unfortunately, such a toxic life, or I should say not a life, but a toxic world, and the lifestyle is not ideal still. As much as I think in certain circles, I say this often, but in certain circles, a lot of people are waking up and they're paying more attention to health and wellness, and they're looking at longevity. I don't just want to live longer, but I want to live better longer,
Mm.
right? But I still think that there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's like this dark space where a lot of people don't understand that when you're looking at health from a functional perspective, it's really different than just going through your standard, say, conventional doctor and getting those basic markers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just for example, I mean, when I was looking at my testosterone levels, I was in the low 300s in terms of nanograms per deciliter. And a standard doctor is looking at anything from 260 up to 960 or so. So it's a pretty broad range, and it's lower than what we're looking at from a functional perspective. So you can be within a standard range. I was within a standard range and I still had all of these symptoms. I lacked energy. I had low libido. I had brain fog. I had joint pain. It was really hard for me to put on muscle and lose weight like I used to. And all of that came down to the range that we were looking at. So just shifting the perspective and realizing that we don't want to be the average American. The average American is largely sick. Metabolic syndrome is running rampant right now in the U.S., especially because of the high sugar and starchy carb content that's in our foods. Not to mention all the additives and everything else. But really understanding that conventional medicine is not really meant to heal us and create a foundation for health. It's really meant to mask symptoms and keep us where we are so that we continue buying pills that don't really work. And that's another conversation another day. But
No, it's a
yeah,
conversation we often have here. It's true.
got it. Yep, yep. So really understanding, where I was in terms of my hormones, but also my vitamins, my electrolytes, my kidney and liver health. Like all of that was so foreign to me. And when I had a clinician and a health coach sit down with me and actually map out like, hey, this is what we need to put in your body so that it works optimally, that's when things started to change for me.
Yeah. And, to just piggybacking off of this, it's hard because I think that a lot of people don't know where to go or they don't know where to start. And, you said something like, yeah, well, they said that I was in range or I was average, but you're still feeling the way you're feeling. And then they're telling you, no, 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 you're good. And it's almost like
Oh, you're
this
fine. Yep.
gaslighting type of a situation, even if they're not intentionally doing it, because they're
Hmm.
just pulling from the toolbox that they have, right? They're taking from what they've learned. They don't have all of the other, say, information, knowledge, however you want to put it, that some of these people in the functional space or in the holistic wellness world has. So it's just like, it's not that they're intentionally, maybe the system, I'll say it, maybe the
Yeah.
system, but there's a lot of well-intended practitioners or doctors or MDs, but they just don't have it. They don't know it. And so it's like you feel as though you're just like, okay, you're telling me one thing, but I still don't feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. Vanessa, such a good point. I mean, we hear that all the time. I'm on patient calls all day, and the majority of the calls start with, I've been to my primary care and they said I'm fine. They won't give me hormone replacement therapy. They won't give me peptides, even though I know that they're going to help me. And most times it comes out of a lack of information. They don't have the access to the right medications, but also the right information in order to properly treat people. It's a systemic thing. And I think that we're moving in the right direction, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Agree. Absolutely agree. And that's why we're here. That's part of the reason why we're here, right? Because we want to just, be whatever help that I say like minister, it's like sometimes it's our ministry and we're called to speak on certain things or, our life pushes us in a certain direction. And I feel like, that's why we're doing what we're doing because we're just trying our best to do what we can to educate people for me, I'm the bridge. So you're the expert. And we're trying little by little, so that people can get that information. I want to sort of start here because I know we're going to be speaking a little bit more to men. I mean, of course, this is men and women, but in terms of men's health and preventative health, do you sort of feel like men are a little hesitant or maybe a little bit harder when it comes to not just knowing what to do? Because I think, like I said, that's sort of both men and women. I think in general it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm eating better, I'm working out, I'm eating better, and that's probably all I have to do. Like, someone might have symptoms and still not what to do, still not know what to do. But what if someone is just kind of like cruising along, the guy's just kind of like, yeah, I go to the gym, I do my thing. And is not really super proactive. Do you feel like men are sort of not, they don't jump into this as quick as women? Like, what do you have to say about this?
I think there's a little bit of a negative stigma when it comes to men seeking out help, especially when it comes to hormones. I mean, I didn't want to come out and say, "Hey, I have low testosterone. What can I do about it?" I mean, that's not something that I think men are as ready to admit. So I think that it's a little bit harder for them to kind of start that process. Um, you know, I think that we really need to here, I'll put it this way. So I talk to patients on a daily basis, and a lot of times, we will start men on hormone replacement therapy, and their testosterone is pretty good. It's not great, but we get them to a more optimal range, and they're like, we check their levels again in about 3 months. We talk to them, ask them if they're having any symptoms, how they're feeling. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I would have done this sooner." It's like you operate at a certain level for so long that kind of becomes the new norm. And you just see that as like, this is the way I'm supposed to feel. We just accept aging as this end all be all, like this is how I'm supposed to feel at 37 years old. And a lot of times it just takes a little bit of optimization and either supplements, peptides, hormone replacement therapy to get us to an optimal level to make us realize and open our eyes that like, oh my gosh, like I was operating at such a low level for so long. And that kind of opens that world up for men especially, but women as well. I mean, we see it every day with women too.
That is such a good point. I love that you brought this up because I think that all of us, myself included, at some point maybe we've had, whether it's a chronic issue or something that's maybe not as long, but it's very easy to get stuck into a routine, into a way of feeling, into a way of being. And, I think that this world is one giant racket, if I'm honest. And I think that we are like, in the US in particular, we're sort of in this like go, 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 like, just you got to be high functioning all the time and do all the things. And rest is for when you're dead. And, just like that kind of a mentality. But what's happening is that people are burning out and or there's just other stresses in life. There's the world stress on top of it, which is a whole nother show for another day. That's everything combined sort of can really have a huge effect. And then you sort of just slowly lower. It's not like one day you just fall. It's like this slow lowering. And then all of a sudden you're kind of operating in this very like average to below average walk and way of life. And you don't even remember what it felt like to feel good. And so
Yep.
it's, to your point, it's like, these men that are coming in and they're getting, to some degree more information and then being able to sort of optimize their health. And then they're going, holy cow, what? Like, why didn't I think of this before? Or why wasn't I introduced to this information before? I'm sure you see it all the time.
And it kind of works in reverse too. I mean, whenever I started supplements, I was like, okay, when is this going to start working? And then fast forward like 3 months later, and I'm like, I have so much energy. Like I got my vitamin D up, I got my B12 up, I got my folate level up, and I got my labs done again. And they asked me how I was feeling. I was like, I feel great. And it just kind of snuck up on me. It wasn't like this overnight thing which that can happen too, depending on, your ailments and your symptoms. But it works in the other way too. As long as you start putting the right things in your body and you're more aware of it, it'll eventually get to where you want it to be. And it sometimes creeps on you up on you on that way too.
Yeah, yeah. I always say that as much as, and believe me, I mean, I definitely, like, if I could just put it this way, we don't have time to talk about me today, but if I did, you would know that, like, if I can say this, anybody could say this, which is symptoms, as hard as they are to feel, they are information. They are information that's given to us, and our body is speaking to us. Our body is always doing the best that it can to keep us afloat, alive, and it adapts. And some people, it's like, oh, it's attacking me. And I don't think so. I don't think that's the way our body works. I think we're way too divinely designed for that. I think that symptoms are a blessing as hard as they can be. And so if we just listen and we take the time to really try to understand the way the body works and give it what it needs, we can see absolutely miraculous things, whether it is in a week, a day, a month, or a year.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So, is there anything else that you want to say before we start? I really want to kind of hone in on the testosterone part for a sec, but you know, about conventional blood work versus functional. And the way that I kind of look at it is like also it's like reactive versus proactive, because a lot of times when you're looking at functional blood work, you're able to see things sort of on this timeline that's different. And you're able to sort of be like, oh, okay, like this might be something that could affect me down the line. Because we're looking at it differently and now we can tackle it. But is there anything else that you want to say about how it plays into root cause and sort of like targeting longevity overall?
I think that it's really important for continuous blood work, like you said. I mean, we recommend every 6 months if you're not on any kind of hormone replacement therapy or anything that's really affecting, your hormone levels. If you are on hormone replacement therapy, we require quarterly check-ins. So we'll get your complete hormone panel, schedule a consultation, that kind of thing. So regular check-ins is really important, and getting a baseline and then tracking that progress along the way, at least every 6 months, is really important. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but yes,
You did. No,
yeah,
you did. Well, I think what you're saying is like it's really important to continue to measure because we can
sure.
be theoretical and we can go by symptoms, which is important, right? Or the lack of symptoms. Like, how are you feeling? But I think it's really nice to be able to actually see something concrete.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that was so difficult for me is that I was essentially putting things in my body that I thought would work. I'd hear a podcast, I'd read a book, and this person's taking this, maybe it'll help me, but I didn't have the underlying information to know if it was actually making a difference. So once I got my blood work checked for the first time, I was like, okay, now we have a baseline. Now we know what's going to happen if I put this in my body. It should theoretically, make this level go up. So we can track it along the way. But that information is crucial to optimizing your health.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point. You guys, I hope that you're hearing what Adam is saying right now because I'm all about experimentation and like I'm all about like, hey, like you're your own advocate and ultimately like even from an intuitive perspective, if you really feel like you want to try something, like, go for it as long as you're responsible. But at the same time, there's nothing I think that helps more than testing or than getting some sort of concrete evidence-based information in front of you and to be able to track that short term into long term. I think it's not even helpful just for your body but mentally too. You feel as though you're making progress, you're going in the right direction, or if you're not, then you can tailor and tweak, right? Don't you feel the same way?
Absolutely. Another point that's really important is that, yes, you can get your blood work done, but having someone who is knowledgeable in that blood work and can tell you what you should be taking and why and how that's going to affect your blood levels is equally as important. There are a lot of clinics out there who are great at giving you diagnostic reports of your blood, but they don't necessarily have that consultation aspect to it. And I think that's why we kind of set ourselves apart at Blokes and Joi, is that we have a clinician walk through line by line on all of your blood levels to tell you exactly what it means.
That is important because there are some, and I have friends that unfortunately have gone through a little bit of this where they've gone through, testing and even in the functional space. And then they're kind of left with questions at the end. And so then they're forced to go elsewhere, right? Like they pay for the program or they pay for the big panels. And then they're kind of still stuck because they have these further questions or, okay, so what do I do about the inflammation? Or what do I do about the
Mhm.
whatever, be it ferritin levels or some sort of, protein level or whatever it is. And it's like, well, they have like maybe basic suggestions like, anti-inflammatory diet as an example. That's great, but there might be more questions there. So
Yep.
I think it's really important to have somebody with the knowledge and the experience and also who's looking at you not just as a number, but someone
Right.
who's like you're a person. If there's an individuality aspect to it, I think that that's a really good point to highlight.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Why don't we talk a little bit about testosterone? Because you've mentioned it a couple of times now. And I think, both for men and women, it's important. But I think, like, just for the sake of this conversation and focusing a little bit more on men, why don't you go into just to kind of be foundational about it, why it's important, like why it's important to look at this marker in the first place, and why is it so critical for optimal health and just sort of the way that you feel as a man overall. It's not just about like the gym, right? And all, and working out. I think that's kind of what comes to mind. But give
Yep.
us sort of an overview on why testosterone is so important to look at.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on it. The idea that we usually think about when we think about testosterone is we associate it with men, and then we associate it with increasing libido and increasing strength in the gym. And while those two things are important, there are a lot more things that they kind of go into increasing your testosterone and why it's important. Libido, yes. Sexual function, yes, it's very important. But cognitive function, drive and motivation. One of the things that I noticed right off the bat was that I had more drive and motivation to set goals and then go after them. I got to a point where I felt so lethargic that I didn't want to even think about goal setting. Like the first of the year came around and I was like, oh no, I have to worry about, my year plan and like set goals and go after it. But after getting my testosterone up, that's when things really shifted. And I was like, oh, testosterone really helps with our holistic health and our ability to really go after things. And it's the same thing with women. Women need testosterone for all the same reasons. They don't need as much testosterone, obviously, and progesterone and estrogen are a little bit more important on the women's side, but it is equally as important. If your testosterone is below the teens and you're a woman, you really need something, whether that be diet and exercise, whether that be peptides, whether that be hormone replacement therapy to get your testosterone up to an optimal level, or you're just not going to feel as good as you could. So there are aspects on both the men and women's side that are so important. And most of it comes down to energy levels, libido, your ability to sleep well, your muscle function, memory retention. I mean, all of those things kind of go into testosterone. But all of these different panels that we talk about, your blood sugar, your liver, your hormones, your red and white blood cells, all of them are so interconnected. And that's one of the things that is so important to going through your blood levels with somebody knowledgeable, is that they can kind of walk you through like, hey, if you do this, it's probably going to affect this down here. So let's make sure that we add this as well. And it's just very interconnected, as you probably know. And something that really needs a full scope and a full, look at in order to improve.
I really like the fact that you just touched on that. And I'll just give like a small example. I was having some very quick conversation with a friend that's been ongoing, excuse me, over the last month or so about blood work, and specifically her blood work and things like that. And we were talking about a particular marker this morning. I was sitting there having my coffee, chatting back and forth with her. And she made like a comment to me saying like, oh goodness, just one more thing, right? Like one more thing to worry about, because we were honing in on one particular marker. And I said to her, you know what though? It's not. It's really just it's one big thing. It's one big puzzle, or it's one big, and I don't mean big in a bad way. I just mean it's one system, and it's not like one more thing to worry about. It's just one more indicator regarding the entire system. And so it's just giving us more information, because at the end of the day, there might be some inflammation to lower. There might be, there's something out of balance. But instead of looking at it as, oh, great, here's another issue, here's another problem, it's just this beautiful interconnectedness. And, again, it's information, but one thing affects another, and then another thing is a cofactor for another. And that is, again, to your point a few minutes ago, why it's so important to have somebody who's knowledgeable and to be able to point you in the right direction to get those things more balanced out, right?
Absolutely. And something that helps everything is just a whole foods based diet and exercise. Like if we can just get people to focus on that, most of your labs will come back healthier 100 times out of 100. I mean, there are environmental factors, there are stress factor. I mean, there's so many different factors that come into a human being's health, but diet and exercise is one of the building blocks and the foundational elements of holistic health. And a lot of times we'll just make a couple recommendations like, hey, less ingredients. Like let's pick whole foods, organic foods, drink enough water, get enough sleep, and we see really, really big change just by doing those things.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was gonna ask you, don't you feel like sleep is another one? Because
Sleep is huge. Yep.
huge. It's so
Yep.
huge. It really is. And I like that you came back to this because, as much as we dive into a lot of specifics on this show or we get into fancies, I call it the fancies. If you don't have the foundational stuff in place first, the fancy stuff is not going to make a difference. Like you can be, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something off the bat. Like I have a red light device right next to me, right? Like you could be doing the red light therapy, or you can be doing the cold plunging, or whatever it is that you do, or even something as more optimal, right? Like peptide therapy, things of that nature. But if you're jumping to those things and you don't have these foundational things set ahead of time, right? It's like you're putting the cart before the horse, you
Yep.
know?
Such a good point. And we have these discussions a lot surrounding GLP-1 medications, especially. I know that you guys have kind of talked about that on your show previously. And patients who see results on the GLP-1 medications, but still don't, get their diet and exercise routines in order, that's when you see the big rebound effect after coming off the medication. That is not the goal of these medications. The medications are meant to inspire change, to kind of get you on the right track, bring down your blood glucose levels, bring down your insulin levels, give your pancreas a chance to rest and not have to pump out so much insulin every time you eat. And then we start to titrate off of the medication and down to a maintenance dose or completely off because of those other aspects, your diet and exercise coming along with it. That's the main goal of those. Ozempic has the worst stigma around it right now because people are abusing it. They're using it for the wrong reasons. They don't really need it, or they're dosing themselves too high and starting to lose muscle mass. They are amazing peptides that can be used properly and get good results, but they have to be used properly. And you have to use those other aspects of diet and exercise along with it to really see and maintain those results.
Yeah, really well said. And you definitely are paralleling some of what Vince, who spoke to this a couple episodes back, what he talked about. I don't remember the exact percentage, but I think it's between like 80 and 90% of people who are using the Ozempics and the Wegovy's and all that are doing it wrong and doing it without guidance, because you need really strategic guidance. And again, without those foundations, you're going to be lost and you're going to have this rebound effect down the line, to your point.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm kind of curious, what else do you see? We've touched a bit on testosterone. You mentioned insulin resistance and blood sugar, which I think is really important if you want to touch on that really quick and sort of what you're seeing with patients, particularly men. But I'm also curious, I guess a two-part question is what else you're seeing a lot of when you are talking to clients or patients and things are coming back on blood work. So what are some other common things that are sort of out of line or out of balance?
Glucose is very frequently elevated. Now, it kind of comes down to like, were you fasting for the full 12 hours? What does your diet look like? Did you exercise the day before? So those can come into play, but we are looking at a hemoglobin A1C level, which is more of a 3-month average. So that gives us a longer time span to really look at what your blood sugar is doing over a 3-month span. So we do have markers that can tell us, hey, is this a momentary spike or is this an ongoing thing that we need to really make changes in? And we have supplements for blood sugar, berberine, chromium, alpha lipoic acid. Those are all kind of ones that can help with blood sugar and insulin regulation. If your insulin is also really high, your fasting insulin, that's kind of the telltale sign of, hey, you have some insulin resistance, and we really need to work on changing up the diet and the exercise to get your blood sugar and your insulin down. Another thing that I see really, really frequently is low vitamin D. People just don't get enough vitamin D. We're not out in the sunlight as much as we should be. We're not eating the right things. Vitamin D is super, super important for our energy levels, for our mood, for our cognitive function, for our sexual function. And I probably 90% of the people that I look at have deficient vitamin D. That's one thing that I was very deficient in. I was under like 30, and we want you above 50, like 50 to 90 is kind of the ideal range for vitamin D. So vitamin D being low is one of the major things. And then hormones just being out of balance is pretty typical as well. Testosterone being low in men and women. Women kind of depending on where they are in terms of perimenopause and menopause. That's something that we really focus on at Joi as well. But it's a whole gamut of things that we have to look at. But vitamin D, B vitamins, blood sugar, those are kind of the main ones that we really need to work on first.
Yeah, yeah, it's not surprising. And I feel as though, and you can probably speak to this a little bit as well, but I feel as though sometimes, again, this brings me back to what we were saying a couple of minutes ago, having a practitioner or having somebody to sort of outline things for you. But sometimes it's not even a matter of like high low. It's a matter of how these things are working in conjunction with one another and how these things are working in tandem with one another. And there's all these cofactors and things like that. So do you find that sometimes people will look at blood work, or a man will look at blood work and say, oh, well, all I need to do is take this and then everything will be good. But really there's more to the story there. What do you have to say about that?
There's typically more to the story, but sometimes it is a quick fix. Sometimes, everyone's blood levels, or not everyone's, but a specific patient's blood levels will be great except for one marker. Maybe their vitamin D is low, maybe their testosterone is low, and we just work on that. And we do have peptides that can target specific things now that it makes it a little bit easier to target one thing and not mess with a whole gamut of other things. So they are very interrelated, but there are times when it's just, one or two things that we need to work on, as long as diet and exercise is where it needs to be. If that piece is not there, as we've already kind of discussed, that can lead into a whole host of issues in several different panels.
That makes sense. And also, that's really encouraging, I think, for some people because maybe they feel good, but maybe they're not feeling amazing and they would
Yep.
like to just optimize their health. And maybe it is one thing. I see things even in just speaking with others, or like I said, I've had a million jobs within the healthcare system over the years, but maybe it's just like zinc as an example, or to your point, vitamin D, so that
Yep.
is encouraging because sometimes it really could be something minor
Yep.
that makes a big difference.
And a lot of
Um,
times on their health history form, I'll look at their health history form and they'll list a list of symptoms that they're having. And I can almost guarantee I know kind of around what they're needing in terms of, supplements or hormones. So, we ask, very, very detailed questions before we even see them so that we can get a broad perspective of how they're coming in and what we need to do for them.
That's so nice because it really is so different than, I guess, unfortunately, still what the average setup would be. You go into your practitioner or your conventional doctor and you tell them what's wrong, and they've got an average of 7 to 9 minutes with you because they're running it through insurance and they've got to meet us. I'm sorry, if any, I don't mean to offend doctors, but unfortunately, they're under the thumb, right?
Hmm.
And it's just not. There's just not a whole lot of rapport there
Yep.
oftentimes, or they just don't have the time to spend to go over all of these things with you, lifestyle factors and stress. And when's the last time you went, into a doctor's office, in the conventional space, and they're asking you about community or relationships or, whatever the case is? This kind of stuff is important and it plays in. I'm going to touch on that in a bit with you too, but it's so nice to be able to have somebody that just spends the time because it's necessary.
It's such a good point. And I mean, if you look at the average wait time for conventional doctors, I don't know what it is, but I guarantee it's not 2 to 3 days. That's what we've gotten ours down to. And that's something that really sets us apart, is that you're getting your blood drawn, we're getting the results back, and then you're seeing a clinician within a couple of days. And patients will just come in exhausted. They're like, I have been to every different specialist. I've been to a doctor. It took me 3 weeks to get in. It's really sad that we've kind of gotten to this place. And I think that, telehealth companies are really focusing more on the patient experience, which is a great thing. But we still have work to do.
Yeah, amen. We do. We do. I mean, like I said, I think we're in a different place today. I think social media has changed the game, if I'm honest. You could probably agree with me, but I think social media has just like, there was this narrow lens before, and now the lens is just, it's like so wide for people because they're starting to see and hear and research and then go, wait a second, you mean there's so much more to the story? I have all these other options I didn't even know I had, right? But yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done. You keep mentioning peptide therapy, and I just want to kind of circle back to that for a second because for those that are a little bit unfamiliar, and we touched on, Ozempic as an example, but
Mhm.
can you give a little bit of a basic explanation about peptide therapy, what it can do, what it does, sort of the process, just basic, process, and
Sure.
why it can play into longevity for men?
Peptides are just chains of amino acids, and amino acids are kind of the building blocks of our bodies that do all the work for us. So they help with metabolism, tissue regeneration, hormone secretion. I mean, insulin, for example, is a peptide. So we've found ways to compound these peptides in labs, and then different means of giving them to ourselves, whether injection, nasal spray, creams, capsules, and they work on different processes in the body. Samorelin, for example, it helps us release more growth hormone as we sleep, and it helps with lean muscle mass. It helps with metabolism. It helps with our immune system. There are several different applications for each peptide. GLP-1s, they're working on your blood sugar and your insulin regulation. So they are meant to upregulate certain systems in our body, and we do it through, like I said, injections, creams, capsules, different ways to get it into our body.
Yeah. I think it's important to sort of outline again why these things need to be handled with people who are experienced in knowing how to handle them. Because I think there's a lot of ways too that you can get your hands on peptides or peptide therapy and sort of not know what you're doing. And I know that that's happening. Unfortunately, I've talked to people, not here, but I've spoken to people, just in life who are just experimenting. And they've sort of just they pick and choose from different information that they've read. And there's not a whole lot of, I guess, knowledge or experience there. And they're just kind of like, throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And I feel as though it's important to have people who are, very knowledgeable about this kind of therapy because I think it can be, to your point, exceptional in terms of how it can affect the body. But we need to know how to appropriately, implement it into our lives and for our bodies.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Peptides, they haven't been around that long, and we're still learning about them. And, making sure that you're getting them from a credible source is very, very important.
Yes.
Um, most peptides won't do a lot of harm, but some can do some harm, especially if they're not compounded the right way or given the right way. So yes, very, very important to, check your sources, make sure you're not getting them off, the black market or wherever you get them. I don't even know. Um, it's really important to have quality products when it comes to things that we're putting in our body,
Yeah.
always.
Always.
Yeah.
Actually, no matter what. Yeah,
No
that's a
matter
great
what.
point. No
Yep.
matter what. I mean,
Yep.
I even tell people be really cautious. Not that there aren't small businesses and really great businesses that you utilize Amazon for like Amazon store, and they have an Amazon store as an example. But I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who have bought things even off of Amazon thinking it was a quality product and it was a scam and it was just a supplement or whatever. But they are tampering with these things that's why they get them cheaper. And it's just not what it was, or it's not what it claims to be. So it's important.
For sure. Yeah. You would think that Amazon would have some kind of verification process around that kind of stuff. But yeah,
I
that's
feel like they
crazy to think
do.
about. Yeah.
I feel like they do, but people's
They're huge. They're huge. They're
yeah.
things that will always slip through the cracks, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Just, I think the overall message, my friends, is just, be really be really diligent and do your research, when it comes to anything, whether it's supplementation or a practitioner or, anybody that you're working with. Just, intuition is key too, I think.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yep.
I kind of want to segue a little bit, and I feel like this is a really important part of health. And like I said, I kind of want to stick with men, and even though it definitely involves relationships and all of that, but there's this really important intersection between men's health and mental health that I think is under discussed and underrated. And I kind of want you to touch on the fact that, yes, all of this stuff is important, right? Like the hormone levels and the numbers and the blood work, and it's foundational, it's critical today, especially today in today's world. But there's this other element of health that I think maybe especially with men, women too, but I think women might be a little bit more proactive in this arena.
Yep.
That is important. And it's, how other things in our life can really drastically affect our health and therefore our life. And, that includes romantic relationships, friendships, community, the environment that we're in. You can kind of take this however you want to. I know you've got some things to say, and I really want you to just branch off however it feels right for you.
Perfect. And yeah, they're so correlated, right? So if our bodies aren't healthy, our mind is usually not healthy, and vice versa. Something that I've implemented in my life is therapy. I do both individual and couples therapy with the same therapist, and I know that's kind of like, ooh, that's not really the way that most therapists do it. But I found a really, really great therapist here in Nashville, and one of the things that I struggle with, and really all the men in my family struggle with, is communication and bottling things up and pushing things down and not being vulnerable with other people, especially other men. And something that I've really implemented through therapy is community and how important community is. And that's just the way that we're built. We are communal creatures. We need to be around other people. Community is so important to my mental health. I can't really speak for anyone else, but science shows that we are meant to be in community with other people. We're not meant to do everything alone. So communication, not only with my fiance, but with other people, and not keeping my doubts, my worries, my fears, my anxieties all bottled up, was one of the biggest changes that I've made for my mental health. I'm actually leading an all men's group through my church starting tonight. We're doing 12 weeks. We get together, we talk about scripture, we basically go through life together, and then there's a big conference at the end. And that is something that I cannot stress enough for men. Like, you have to get around other like-minded people, and you have to do life with other people. Especially men, we get into this box, and it's like, I need to work on my health. I need to take care of my family. I need to make sure that I'm good before we kind of branch out and let other people into our little bubble. But once we do that, the world opens up, and mental health improves. And I think Jordan Peterson said this: there is not a more miserable individual than one who keeps to himself, or one who is not sharing with others, who's not vulnerable with others. I'm paraphrasing. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure he said that at some point.
sounds
um,
familiar.
but misery is found in focusing on yourself and individualism. And that is what our society has turned into, unfortunately. But when we start focusing on other people and serving other people, and finding purpose in serving other people, that is when mental health really improves, at least for me. So community and communication, those are two of the biggest things that I've changed.
Oof. There's a whole lot this is going to be a challenge for me because how am I going to narrow down my thoughts right
Yeah.
now? But I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that, well, first of all, I just want to respond with the fact that you're right. I think it's really difficult. Men are often brought up in, just culturally speaking, however, I mean, where they tend to think that they have to carry everything on their own. They think that they have to hold everything inside. There's this fear, whether it's conscious or subconscious, about being vulnerable. And that is a very scary place for men to think about going, let alone go. I read something just within the last 24 hours that's, and again, now I'm paraphrasing, but but I think the quote goes something along the lines of, the cave that you're afraid to enter is where the treasure that you seek is, like something along those lines. And it's like, sometimes it's these places that you need to go where the absolute beauty and the absolute answers are. And when you focus on these places that might be a little scary, or the doors that you don't want to open, your whole entire life changes. And you might have this physical issue, and then all of a sudden you go into these other areas where they don't necessarily seem like they're related, but all of a sudden you start to work on this area, and then all of a sudden your physical health gets better, not just your relationships, not just the, community aspect and all of the feel good feelings, but you're starting to see a pickup in all these other places. And it's just amazing to me. But again, it's sometimes very difficult to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, as men, and especially, speaking from personal experience with my relationship, I wanted to show up as this buttoned up guy who had it all together, who was the rock in the relationship, who could be leaned on if my fiance needed anything. But she couldn't relate to that. She couldn't relate to someone who didn't have any doubts or fears, or who couldn't express those to her. So it was really hard for her to attach to something that was all buttoned up and like perfect, and not perfect in a very performative sense. And I think men kind of find that, out amongst other men too. It's like, if this guy looks like he has it all together, at least from what he's showing me, and he's not telling me about any of his issues or anything that he has going on. So it's really hard for me to relate to that. And now I find that I relate way more to someone who is just like word vomit. This is all the things that I have going on. I'm messing up over here, but I've got this together over here, and just being more real and open about it. That's when we create lasting relationships, and that's where mental health really starts to improve in terms of what I've seen with men, at least.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I think too that this has been spoken about on the show before, but I think when it goes in the opposite direction, there's this unfortunate thing that happens where we tend to, and I think you see this a lot with men. There's this bottling up, which then turns into resentment and unforgiveness and things that can really poison the soul and poison the body. I mean, in Chinese medicine, they say that a lot of that is held in the liver and the gallbladder, this unforgiveness, this resentment. And it really is, our body, I think, holds and stores a lot of emotion. It's not woo woo. It's really actually very scientifically based. But there's just, when things change for you in that way, be it a man or a woman, I mean, I think like sky's the limit. And, God is got this plan for your life, but you also have to kind of walk through the doors. And I think that like if someone's sitting here listening to this and they're like, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I think I do okay, but maybe I don't have the best community, or maybe I thought my work was my purpose, but maybe there's like something else out there for me. Maybe get quiet, like Adam's talking about, like get quiet, like really think about, maybe there's something that I need to do, instead of waiting for it to come to you, maybe I need to take a step. And it might feel a little unsturdy or a little unstable, but it could be literally an answered prayer for you, and your whole entire life, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health could change, right? Don't you feel the same?
Absolutely. And, I think we just get so focused on making money and improving our status, and, things that kind of, bolster us up a little bit. But find anyone who is helping someone else live a healthier, happier, more purposeful life, and ask them if they are happy doing that. 100 times out of 100, they're going to say yes. And I find that serving other people is what makes me the happiest. And I feel like if we focus on that, we'll just be happier people.
Yeah. Because didn't you say you came from like the banking world, right? And so
Yep.
I can assume that there was probably just a whole different outlook that you had versus now, which, serving others. I mean, technically, yes, of course, there's a business aspect involved in this,
For
right?
sure.
But there's this root that I think is, not only stimulated, but really is kind of like where everything is coming from. And I think that motivation factor that you have, like, it's so authentic and genuine. And when you're operating from that place, I think that it just completely transfers out to people differently. And it's an energy exchange, right? I mean, it really is like you're putting it out, you're getting it back. And again, that has long lasting effects, I think, on your life and again, your health overall.
Absolutely. And I don't want to knock bankers. I think that, there are people in the banking industry that love their job. They
Yeah.
love like, giving a loan to a construction company and, building up the city and making things more efficient. And I love that. I think that, we can find purpose in anything that we do, but there has to be some kind of passion behind it. There has to be, some part of yourself that is really driving it and making you want to go to work every day. And I think that's really important. I didn't find that in banking. I found that I was just chasing, the next carrot that was kind of hung in front of me and making more money. But at the same time, someone can find a lot of purpose in that. And I think that's the beauty of life. And that's why we were put on this earth to do different things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I like that you came in and said that because, again, you could be doing whatever it is. It doesn't even matter, as long as there's, I guess, the right motivation, the right intentionality, and, you're balanced about it. Anything can be very purposeful. So whether it's working with, people in addiction or working in banking, like you said, I mean, everything, there's a
Yep.
need for everything.
And I think your purpose can change multiple times throughout your life. I don't think you're tied to what you're doing now, even if it is really fulfilling. I think it can change based on where God wants to take you.
Oh, that is so true. In fact, I was just listening to this being talked about recently through my own pastor, and we were talking about gifts of the Spirit, and it's so true because sometimes, you might have a gift that you're not even aware of yet, but maybe you're not ready for it. Maybe there's some preparation that needs to happen. And
Yeah.
so, where you think you might be, say in 10 years, you might be completely different and serving others in a totally different way. But there's some preparation or maybe some healing that needs to happen before you get there. And that's okay. It's the rhythm of your life. But that's such a great point. Things do change.
Yeah. And I just want to encourage people who might be feeling a little bit stuck or feeling like they're in a season of just suffering. I thought that that was the worst thing ever whenever I started to come into this season of suffering and my body hurt. I didn't know, like, everything that I said before that I was going through, that led me to where I am today, and now I can use that suffering to help other people. And what a gift. I mean, that is, you know finding purpose in suffering, while you can't see that purpose yet, is something that I wish could be taught in schools, because it's really, really hard to kind of hold on to. It is going to get better. I am going to find meaning after this, and I can go back and connect the dots looking back. 2020 is I wish we had that beforehand, but looking back at my life, I see all the moments of suffering and what it led to, and it's always led to something better.
Yeah. That's a well, if there's obviously there's regular listeners here, but there are people probably listening that know parts of my story, and I cannot relate to what you just said more. I'm somebody who has walked a path of a ton of long suffering and not even completely out of it yet. And also not knowing when that end date is. And, but yet having that perspective that honestly is not always easy. It's not this, okay, have the perspective and then, you're good. It's constantly renewing that thought, constantly renewing your mind, constantly reminding yourself that this is not going to be for nothing. And that sometimes these trials or the suffering, be it long or short, they are often, not often, they are always allowed, I should say, in our lives for something greater. And we have to have trust and faith in that, because if we don't, then honestly, we're going to be circling the drain for the rest of our lives, you
Yep.
know? So
Mhm.
I really appreciate this part of the show, because I think not only is it imperative and critical when we're talking about health, but I think when we're talking about men, this often gets sort of put kind of to the side or not really discussed unless you're actively seeking it out, right? Like you, like maybe in therapy and so forth. But it is such a important piece of the puzzle, I think, when we're looking to optimize how we're functioning in life.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we sort of land the plane here, do you have any last thoughts or anything that you would like to share with people who are, or even just someone who's listening and is like, okay, yeah, this sounds amazing, and it sounds like it could be great, but I still feel like, you know, it seems like I've been circling the drain for a really long time, and I don't know if things work for other people, but not for me, right? Like, what would you share with someone like that, or just any other last thoughts that you would like to provide?
So one of the things that I like most about the company I work for, Blokes and Joy, we're very upfront and transparent about what things cost, where a lot of online, telehealth companies are not that way. You basically fill out a health history form and then you're kind of sent through the ringer and you finally get to know what's wrong with you. And then you find out the pricing. Like all of our pricing is listed on the website. And it's weird that we're different in that way, but everything that you see there, you see how much a certain peptide costs. You see how much our hormone replacement therapy subscription costs. You see how much supplements cost. And there's no guesswork. So if you feel stuck and you feel like nothing has worked in terms of your health in the past, then I would just recommend filling out one of our health history forms. You don't really have a whole lot to lose. You're going to, you're going to see how much certain lab panels cost. And then once you buy one of those, then you're going to get your results back and we're going to have a consultation with you. So that the lab costs money, but the consultation doesn't cost anything. So one of the things that I would recommend doing is getting more information about your health. That is one of the best things that I've done for myself. And, I was throwing darts at a dartboard blind before I got my blood levels. And then I got a baseline and I was like, okay, now I have something to work with. So that information is so important to improving your health. So that's really what I would leave the listeners with is, getting your blood drawn and seeing exactly where you are and then having someone go through it with you. That is the best place to start in terms of changing things for your health.
Yeah. No, it's very good advice. And I think that there's nothing that, I don't know, if I put myself in that position, which I am, actually I'm fairly due for going through this again myself. It's been a while since I've had some comprehensive testing, so I'm actually due as well. But to have a personalized plan is very settling, because you just kind of feel like, okay, now I have some sort of a path, right? Like I don't have to guess and, like you said, throw a bunch of darts at the dartboard and see, what sticks. It's kind of like, give me something I can work with, and something that seems tangible and attainable and doable, and something that I'm not like, confused about. So I know that's really important for me, especially in today's day. I'm like, I don't need any more stress. Okay. I
Yep.
just need something
Yep.
that's going to be straightforward, easy. Someone's going to help me. I mean, I'm a researcher by nature, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm like, I don't want to screw around. I want someone to help me too.
Yep.
So it's really good advice. Where can people learn more about Blokes and Joy? And you guys, he's saying two different names right now, but Joy is the women's health aspect of the company, and Blokes is the male health aspect of the company. So just for anyone who's wondering, but where can people find more about you, and where can people find more about the company that you work for?
So I'm on Instagram. My Instagram handle is ADMANDEW. You can find me there. For Blokes and Joy, we're actually combining websites just to make it a little bit easier. It's kind of confusing going the Blokes and the Joy, so we're combining it into one website soon. But for now, blokes.co, so blokes.co, or For the women's side, Choose Joy, and that's Joi. So choosejoy.co. That's where all the information is. It's pretty seamless once you go to the website. You do the health history form, and then we kind of walk you through the process. It's all very automated after that point until you see your clinician. So that's where you can find us. I'm open if you want to Instagram message me. I'm happy to answer any questions for you. But this is kind of my mission now, so I am ready to help in any way that I can.
That's awesome. I love that. I also like the fact that you said that it's seamless because sometimes there's like the whole runaround, right? When you go onto these sites, sometimes it's like it's never ending. So the fact
Yep.
that it's sort of, yeah, it's just an easy process that actually I'm gonna look into it as well. I mean, I already sort of did, I will say prior to obviously, because I got to do a little homework here, but
Yep.
it's definitely seems enticing to me as well. So I will be checking it out. And you guys, as always, I will list all of these links and information in today's show notes. So the episode's show notes should have all the information. And of course, you can find Adam on Instagram. I'll put that in there as well. And like he said, he's more than willing and will offer, any information if you DM him, which I think is lovely. And if you have any questions or you have a hard time finding anything, don't ever hesitate to send me a message. And I will do my best, as always, to point you in the right direction. It has been such a nice conversation. I really enjoyed this. And I think that it's so nice to be able to just talk about, I think, things that, sometimes they feel simple, but I think a lot of people are still struggling with the first step, what to do. And in this case, since we've been focusing a little bit more on men, sometimes it's like, I don't really want to waste my time. I don't really want to spend the time. But in the back of their mind, they're like, I should probably take a little step. So it's just been nice to sort of have a casual conversation about what to do, just for prevention in general. And so, men and women can just think about optimizing their health. So you've been a joy. It has been so, so nice. Thank you for spending the time with us and just educating us today on all of this stuff. It's really been lovely.
Well, thank you again for having me. I had so much fun, and hope I provided some insight for some people.
You definitely did. I mean, I might be the biased host, but I promise you, I think it's gonna go over well, and people are definitely going to have a lot of food for thought here. So again, thank you so much, my friends. Thank you for joining us. Have a really, really blessed day, and I will see you on the next episode.